I stand up because I'm professor by profession, so I want to talk while standing. I like this picture today for two reasons. Number one, you see that once I had more hair, and another thing, this is a proof that I have a tie. By the way, a new one. I bought yesterday for you, and of course it was the first thing to forget it when I came to the airplane, so sorry. Now, I think that how I can express my admiration and respect to this house and to you, ladies and gentlemen, to these people, I think there is only one way to do that. It is to omit introduction and to go to the point immediately. So I consider myself being here as a witness, providing here a testimony to you about the events that really happened, that I was part of them to some extent, and I provide you with a testimony, a case regarding, let's say, slow, gentlemanly moving out of the unions. I do not mean trade unions, of course, I mean other unions. So what happened and how did it happen? My role in that, sorry that I start for myself, but a witness has to disclose the background, isn't it? So, till 1988 I was just normal average professor at Tartu University, but then started the events that were called Singing Revolution in Estonia in 1988. And in the course of events, as being a member of Popular Front of Estonia, I got elected to the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union, where I remained a permanent member till 1991. And it simply happened this way that chairman of my committee was then relatively unknown man, but he later became very popular, was Boris Yeltsin. So it is simply being a right man in the right place, or what. So after that I left politics, and after many rounds I'm back again. But the crucial point here is 1988, 1991, because it is a unique case, a huge empire, the global empire falls apart unexpectedly. I remember it was summer of 1990 when Mr. John Major visited Moscow and talked to us as well, and he insisted that Estonia is doing wrong things. Don't do that. Don't rock the boat. Gorbachev is a good man. You should not, because if you are Western-minded Estonians, you must understand, you must think globally and help Gorbachev, but not fight him. Perhaps even more famous for us was in July 1991 when George Bush Sr. came to the Soviet Union and delivered a speech where he said that the 21st century is going to be determined by the friendship and confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States of America. And here is my hand of friendship, and I want Soviet Union to live forever, survive, etc., etc. And again, don't rock the boat. That, by the way, today it's very noteworthy. Where did he deliver that speech? Of all the places? In capital of Ukraine, in Kiev. And today it is known in history by the famous Kiev chicken speech. He said about confrontation between the Soviet Union determining the 21st century, it was just 3 weeks before the Soviet Union fell apart. So now, there in 1988, small Soviet country, Soviet Republic at that time, Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic, and movement here, movement there, but nobody very really thinking about regaining the independence. And, by the way, about what was the scientific knowledge of that time. Marshall Goldman, famous Sovietologist, after that has said that the new slogan should be Sovietologists of the world unite, because they all failed in all their predictions. So today they are out of proper business consultants everywhere, but that was the situation. So 1988, winds of change, but I don't want to go into the romantic side of the politics, but there was one issue, and I think we can, or you can compare it to some situation in current Britain, I believe. There was one issue that really served as a spark that ignited the whole, I think even to some extent, forgotten national feelings. And that story was, to make, again, long story short, Soviet Union needed badly fertilizers because it was all the time short of grain, buying it from Argentina, Australia, whatever, and it was strategic dependence. The only way to go out, you need fertilizers. Important component of the fertilizer was phosphorite. They looked in Moscow at the map and said, oops, there are huge reserves of phosphorites somewhere there, and it happened to be Estonia. So the risk was in reality there that Moscow will start to dig phosphorites that would have caused not environmental damage, it would cause simply death. Reason very simple. Our drinking water is very close to the surface. And if you dig the phosphorites, then the risk that you will perforate the layer is extremely high. Once it's contaminated, all Estonia plus half of the Latvia, no drinking water. And that was so evident, and it was so dangerous. Plus, of course, the risk of having about 5,000, it's a big number, 5,000 additional immigrants from the rest of the Soviet Union as minors and all these kind of things. And this was a moment where really very many people, starting from some leaders of Communist Party of the Soviet Union, some dissident groups who were under the surveillance of KGB, they all started to think the same way. Wait a minute. Is that now this promised proletarian paradise? We knew that it's not the paradise, but are they thinking there in Moscow at all what's going on here? And then the game started. The Estonian leaders said, and the popular movement behind that, no phosphorite mining. Moscow insisting upon, don't you think about the future of Soviet economy, etc., etc. And after all, it's in the federal interest, so we still start to mine them. Estonians, no, we don't want them. And paradoxically enough, it went even through all the stages of Soviet, let me repeat it, Soviet court and legal system. It may sound funny, but it went through the legalistic steps. And the decision was, Estonian arguments are not sound, research does not prove the danger, etc., so we are going to dig and mine them. And then, actually, sorry for quoting myself, I put down a slogan that sounded, who has the last word after the last word has been said? Soviet constitution, and that's a pretty interesting difference from the European Union, had an article. David reminded me, it was 38, I believe, or 39, sorry, I did not... There was an article that said that each Soviet republic has the right to secede. By the way, just one sentence. Soviet republic has the right to secede from Soviet Federation. Period. Nothing else. And then you start to think, excuse me, if we have the right to secede with all the stuff, the lands, factories, companies, people, resources, etc., we secede as a republic in its totality. Can't we secede in the question of phosphorites? So we leave all other things to you, Moscow, but we take our phosphorites out. Next step, the issue came, Moscow started to ask, and we started to consider that it was also a constitutional provision that said the Soviet Republic is a sovereign socialist state that has voluntarily joined the Soviet Federation. Okay, in the Baltic states case, it was not so voluntary, as you remember, and that has been confirmed by the Atlantic Charter. But no, anyway, let's put even that aside. But now there is issue. What is then sovereignty? This is something that I understand. It's perhaps even foolish of me to talk about this in this place, because everybody knows I believe in Britain. Who is sovereign? And what does that mean? But it was not so very clear then. Because the story was, and here I see the déjà vu with Brussels. By the way, just in case, I was a member of group and political group. We did not want to join European Union so anxiously. We were not very much against, but at least we wanted to delay, but we failed. We are in. So, no, but anyway. So the same story. What is sovereignty? Oh, sovereignty is shared responsibility. This is for Moscow, this is for the Republic. Let's say financial system and central bank is Moscow, defense is Moscow, and then let's say textile industry and education is for the Republic, etc. So sovereignty is shared. So the question, who is going to dig phosphorites, is still iffy. And now comes the crucial point in all that further development. November 16th, 1988, the Supreme Soviet, the Soviet Supreme Soviet, issued declaration on sovereignty of Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. And it said just one thing. Sovereignty means the supreme power over the given territory, period. Sovereignty cannot be shared, it cannot be alienated, it cannot be given away. And Estonia is going to exercise its supreme power through the principle of separation of powers. That separation of powers was introduced to avoid this Soviet thing, because Soviet ideology was that, not like the Commune in Paris in 1871, that all power to the Soviets, that they are executive, legislative, and all at the same time. So, introducing the principle of separation of powers, we broke away also from the Soviet system. But it came as a, let's say, appendix or additional bonus for that sovereignty declaration. No, it was adopted. But I'd like to point at one thing, and I firmly believe in it. Sovereignty is an awfully important thing. You cannot negotiate it. You are sovereign or you are not. You cannot be a little bit pregnant, whether you are or you are not. You are sovereign or you are not. And it can't be in no way that the president or chair or head of sovereign state is subordinate. Yes, we may have negotiations. We may talk about things. We may be nice. By the way, Gorby was and he is a very nice person. Mrs. Thatcher said it's a great guy and we can deal with him and great business, and no doubt about that. Having had both bosses, now Yeltsin closer, Yeltsin was pretty brutal. And he was not a nice person in that sense at all. By the way, he was not an alcoholic as well. I can testify that. So, well, he drank once in a while, but who doesn't? So Gorby was a nice man. But it's not about being nice. And when the talks about the sovereignty was, then there was one absolutely disarming sentence that Gorbachev said, "You Estonians, why don't you love us?" Okay, fine. This is not about love. It is about sovereignty, one and indivisible. So, and all the later developments started from that point. The principle was established. Even if Moscow tried to deny it, it went even so far that the Moscow Institute that granted me doctorate degree invited me to academic council and said that they are going to revoke my degree, that they will take that away. It sounded like Taras Bulba, I give birth to you and I will take it away. I'll take it back. So we gave this, but there was again, like history is always funny. The problem was that Gorbachev's closest buddy was vice chairman of that academic council. So the issue was that I could say, sorry, you gave me that degree, and you can take it away. I can survive without it because I had my employment job, etc., etc. But it was just academic dispute, sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty. And that determined all the further and other negotiations. It was a stated fact that perhaps we will not achieve everything, and nothing will happen immediately, and it will take. But it was possible to start to talk once the positions were clear. Later, a little bit later on, started another thing that needs to be pointed at. As I said, the Constitution had one sentence: Soviet Republic has the right to secede. Well, outrageous was to use this clause or to declare sovereignty, or actually to define what the sovereignty is. By the way, this definition, supreme power over the given territory, is nothing original. It's Jean Baudin, one of the founders of modern state theory, 400, 500 years ago. Simply the definition had been forgotten. So once that was stated, then the further things became slowly and slowly possible. Sadistic trick, by the way. Declaration of sovereignty was declared when Gorbachev was on his visit to India. It happened Friday night. So Saturday, Sunday, declaration of sovereignty of Estonia. And journalists, New York Times, Boston Globe, Paris Match, whoever, the Tribune, calling to Gorbachev, what do you think about the events in Estonia? Gorbachev didn't have the slightest clue what was going on. But self-confident and charmer, as he always was, and still is, he said, well, Estonia is our flagman ship of perestroika. Whatever they do, etc., etc. And one Monday morning, he discovered, oops, 2 press conferences in the presence of President of India were made. So he could not, and actually last time when we talked to Gorbachev, it was by telephone in America in 1994. Simply it was, no, it happened this way that we talked over the telephone, and he pretty honestly said that with that dating of that sovereignty, you were just swines, be honest, Igor. I said, well, that's how history works. So, but no bad feelings anymore, of course, because everything worked out fine. Now, perhaps to wrap up this moment that I'd be more than happy to answer the questions, is that talking, negotiations, arguments are very, not easy, but they are relatively convenient if the positions are clear and non-negotiable. That you do not compromise them. Actually, it does not need even bravery or courage. It is simply a little bit of heart and a little bit of brains. And then it works out. And after that, it is easy. And as I said, once we had declared that, Gorbachev one moment said, okay, fine. No decision is there, and we discussed here with other comrades, and no, okay, and sovereignty, and so on. Later, we declared independence from the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was still there. No independence. Lithuania did the same thing. But what started then was Moscow started to introduce legislation about procedure of secession. So there must be a transitional period for 2 or 3 years. After that, there will be separation, a little bit of money and then stuff like that. Then we will calculate assets and liabilities mutually and stuff like that. And first we went along with it. But being lawyers and politicians at the same time and knowing the tricks, we realized that it is a trap. That once you go into these details, you may be finished. To use it, where the substance is replaced by procedure, then the substance doesn't matter anymore. because it was clear that we are going to negotiate this moving out forever. Arguments, experts, witnesses, what not? So that was the trapping. That was not discovered immediately. But once it was discovered, then the Moscow side started to exploit it. Let's go into technical. Oh, what do you mean? What's the Estonian budget? And what are the principles? Do we need international auditors for the assets and stuff like that? Okay, no, okay, wait a minute. Let's declare first the thing. We are we, and you are you. And we are separate. If that is clear, then after that, we will see. And one, perhaps, a really last argument. I know that it is the Brexit case as well, etc., economic interests. That separation from the Union will be economically harmful, and it will cause damage. That famous Clinton-esque saying, its economy is stupid. Coming from a Marxist country, I understand where this ideology comes from. And no doubt about that. Economy matters. Prices matter, and our lives. They matter. But they definitely matter much less than we think. Estonian independence of the Soviet budget and industry was about 70% of its own GDP. We had military factories, we had industrial investments from the Soviet Union, etc. And they said, but you are going to lose all these businesses and these things. Our answer perhaps was not very smart, but it turned out to be true. We are going to survive, comrades. We are going to survive. And don't ask how. Our survival in independent country is our business. We are very thankful for your concerns, but we accept it just as friendly advice and nothing more. This statement by me is perhaps too religious or whatever, but having been through all these turmoils, etc., I became much more of a person who relies upon faith than God. Let's take the step, and the things will work out. And if we don't have exact blueprint or plan, does not mean that it is not doable or must not be done. After all, the strongest, the biggest, the most influential planning organization was the State Plan Committee of the Soviet Union, and we see now the outcome. Thanks.